man, eh?
Thank you, man. Thank you so much. I'm going to share the screen. So please, so tonight and tomorrow is the Yahrzeit of my mom's mom, Audrey. I don't know if Arthur ever met her. So naturally, I didn't inherit any of my grand's looks or my mom's looks. I got my dad's looks. You can't win them all. But my grand was a very, very special person. I'll tell you something, a pure neshama. She was meticulously honest. She never had a bad word to say about anybody. And even when my grand and my grandfather got divorced, they were actually married twice because they tried to make it work, and life was very difficult. She never had a bad word to say about my grandfather. Not a bad word. And not to my mom, not to us, not to anything. Not about anybody else either. She only had good to say about people, and to be meticulously honest in all her affairs. Even her words were measured, and just extremely warm. A very, very warm person, and grew up in a very difficult environment. Just, Kevin, if you'd like to dedicate the halacha part, and I'm dedicating the Gemara shir to my late grand Audrey.
And maybe it's fortuitous that I've chosen the topic. It's going to be for another couple of sessions on kindness.
Thank you.
Does that apply to your grand?
Very kind. Believe me, what I got up to when I was younger, and a tolerance for the shenanigans, you can't believe. Really amazing.
Okay, so Avraham Avinu is called by our sages the pillar of kindness, such that the prophet Micha prays that Hashem should bestow kindness upon his people in the merit of the kindness of Avraham. The depiction of Avraham's kindness is found in Avos de Rab Nosson. Your house should be open wide in the same way that the house of Eov was open on the north, south, east, and west. Eov, which is Job, said, I did not do like others. Other people ate pure bread, yet fed the poor coarse bread. Other people wore wooden clothing, yet provided the poor people with burlap clothes. I did not do so. From whatever I ate, I also gave to the poor. From whatever I wore, I also gave to the poor. From the wool that I would share and wear, I would make clothes for the poor. Eov began to boast and say, why did Avraham Avinu do that I did not? He was told, Eov, for how long will you brag? If a poor person did not come to your house, you did not have compassion upon him. Avraham did not do like you. On the third day after his circumcision, he went and sat by the opening of his tent, as it is written, while he was sitting at the entrance of the tent in the heat of day. That's from Bereshit. Okay, and last paragraph. Both Avraham and Eov fulfilled the mitzvah of hospitality meticulously and to perfection. However, their approach and view of this mitzvah were quite different. Eov reacted with pity to the sight of a needy person. It pained him to see a hungry person or one dressed in tattered clothing, so he dressed and fed the needy. But Eov did not proactively search for the needy. He reacted to their presence as his sympathies were aroused. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thanks. All right, so what we want to know now is we're focusing on this area of the hybrid. So the Gemara raises a difficulty with the brisa that we just stated, where Rav Yochanan brings in the name of Rabbi Shimon that it's a proof that you can have a sale without that you could have a sale without a slaughter, or a slaughter without a sale. In other words, the liability exemption would be in one case but not the other, whereas Reish Lakish says if there's no penalty for the sale, there's no penalty for the slaughter aspect. So we're learning that the difficulty is as follows. is that one who steals a hybrid and slaughters it pays the fourfold or fivefold payment. That's the part of the brisa that we also learned about, not just the treifa. But the question is, why is one liable to the fourfold or fivefold payment for the slaughter of a stolen hybrid? Because the term seh is written in the passage of the fourfold or fivefold penalty. In other words, if a seh is a hybrid, then why don't you consider it like a donkey or any other animal that's stolen, or any article where it says, and the thief, he shall pay double? Why would there be a four or fivefold payment? Because we learned that there's a four or fivefold payment only in two cases, in the case of an ox and the case of a sheep. Fivefold for the ox and fourfold for the sheep. So therefore we say if a seh is a hybrid, why would there be a four or fivefold payment? It doesn't fit into either of those categories purely. So the Gemara answers that in fact it does, because if you look at the verse in Shmot, Exodus chapter 21, verse 37, it states, if a man shall steal an ox or a seh, and slaughters it or sells it, he shall pay 5 cattle in the place of an ox, and 4 sheep in the place of a seh. So this term seh seems to be a hybrid, but it includes a sheep within that hybrid, it seems, in the classical verse, as well as a pure sheep. So there's a dispute amongst the Rishonim as to what Rava is referring to, because Rava said this actually establishes a model and teaches that wherever the term seh is stated, a samach and a hay, it's meant only to exclude a hybrid. So in other words, Rashi in his commentary to the 78th daf of Chulin said that Rava refers to a verse in Deuteronomy, Devarim, chapter 14, verse 4, which says, these are the animals that you may eat, an ox, a seh of lambs, and a seh of goats. So the fact that the Torah repeats the word seh in this verse, rather than simply stating a seh of lamb and goats, demonstrates that only a seh of lambs, in other words, the offspring of 2 lambs, or you say a seh of goats, which is an offspring of 2 goats, is classified as a seh. So a seh would be seeming to be a pure offspring, not a hybrid, and yet it uses the word hybrid in this brisa. So, but it doesn't include a crossbreed of a lamb and a goat in terms of kashrut. So it seems to be a bit contradictory to the brisa, referring to the hybrid as a seh. Okay. So Tosfot here, however, notes from the Gemara that we're learning in the 78th daf that it's apparent that the verse is not the source for Rava's exposition. So Tosfot says that Rava is actually referring to the verse stated with respect to the Pesach offering, which is in a different part of Shmot. It's in Exodus chapter 12, verse 5, which says, a seh, unblemished, a male within its first year shall be for you, shall it be for the youth, from the lambs or from the goats you shall take. In other words, the Torah in this verse uses the plural term from the lambs, plural, from the lambs, not from the lamb, and the plural from the goats, to indicate that a seh must be from the offspring of 2 lambs or of 2 goats, but not a crossbreed of the 2. So that's where Rava got his exposition. Because basically Rava said whenever the term seh is used, it's meant to exclude a hybrid. So we can see it is excluding a hybrid. Seh is used to show the offspring of 2 goats, or separately the offspring of 2 sheep, but not a combination of a sheep or a goat. So we kind of want to see why in our brasa says uses a hybrid between the 2. So the Gemara answers it's different here in the case of theft, because the verse states the superfluous word or, which, funny enough, in English is the same word. You've either got, how do you say that thing in Hebrew, Kevin? It's the letter or. It's a vav, actually, technically, isn't it? But it's a vav with a aleph, an or. It's an aleph and a
Aleph vav resh.
No, that's or for light.
all as in like or aleph vav. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's aleph vav. It's the or.
Yeah.
It basically means to include the hybrid. So what are we saying here? In other words, the Gemara said, look, when Rava generally makes this exposition, he's saying that this sets up a case scenario wherever the word se is used, it's meant to exclude a hybrid, either from a kashrut point of view or from a Pesach offering point of view. But yet in this case of theft, it means to actually include a hybrid. So how do we know that? Because there's a special word in this injunction of this brisa which states the word or with an aleph and a vav, meaning it's almost a conjunction word. It's an unnecessary word, and it means to teach us to include the hybrid. How? Because the verse states an ox or a se in this verse that we're dealing with here in the 60s. It actually started in the 67th daf, and it concludes that the word ox stated in the end of the verse and the word se stated in the beginning of the verse are actually superfluous for exposition. So the word or, meaning this one or that one, is likewise superfluous for exposition. Okay? So what we're finding out is as follows, is that basically Rava is saying that you can't have crossbreeds. And now verses are necessary with respect to the Pesach itself, because we have a different verse to teach that a hybrid is disqualified from all offerings. So we see not only the Pesach offering, but the Bechorim, the Maisa, etc. So Rava expounds it as coming to define the term seh, stated in the beginning of the verse. So it teaches that the term excludes a hybrid. And whenever else, basically, the term is mentioned in the Torah, a hybrid is excluded. So in our verse, it's different because the minute you see the word or, aleph vav, it's actually an inclusive word because it's superfluous in both the first and second verse. Now it's going to get more tough, which is why, Gavin, you saw me at Usamach where I had to learn, because of this inclusion, exclusion, I thought, like, what's the point of it? It's driving me mad going backwards and forwards. So I'll explain what the concept means behind it. Is that the Gemara is asking, is every superfluous or coming to include a hybrid? Why it was taught in the brisa, the temple states, with respect to bringing an offering of an animal to the temple, an ox or a lamb. So let's use either the Hebrew or the English. In Hebrew it would be aleph vav. In English it would be or. And or is an alternative word. In other words, alternative either the ox or the lamb. But it's still a superfluous word. So that actually excludes a hybrid from being brought as an offering. So we're going to find out why now. Because if you look at Leviticus, Vayikra, chapter 22, verse 27, and you look at the pasuk, it basically reads, an ox or a lamb or a goat, when it is born, shall remain under its mother for 7 days. And from the 8th day on, it shall be accepting for a fire offering to Hashem. So the Brisa expounds each of these verses. It's in the 38th daf of Chulin. So a Gemara here is only citing the beginning of the Brisa, which is related to the subject of, in this case, applied to the subject of theft. So the superfluous or could have simply said something else, guys, without changing the meaning. In other words, you could have said an ox, lamb, or goat. There's 2 words using the word or. So that's the question. Does that make sense, Art? Okay, Kev, do you understand? Or not yet?
Say it again. I still might not understand it, even if you say it again. Okay.
If you look at the verse in Vayikra, chapter 22, verse 7, it says an ox or a lamb or a goat. It could have simply said an ox, lamb, or goat. And you know it means alternatives. The fact that it's got 2 words for or means that the one is superfluous, therefore it's coming to teach you something. And what is it coming to teach you? That in this particular case, the Gemara is asking, it says it's coming to teach us to include a hybrid. So the Gemara asks, is every time you see a superfluous or coming to include a hybrid, because it was taught in the Brisa, the Torah states with respect to bringing a temple offering of an animal, an ox or a lamb, this excludes a hybrid from being brought as an offering. So why is it excluding? Well, we're going to go through it now. But it not only excludes that, but it also excludes with the other word or, because it said an ox or a lamb, and that word or between ox and a lamb excludes a hybrid. But it also has the word or a goat, which excludes a mutant. So you know what a mutant is, guys, according to the Torah. It's not a teenage turtle. Okay? What it actually is it's an animal that, although it's been born by two sheep, it looks like a goat. It looks like a goat, but it actually has two parents that are sheep. So the Gemara answers, Rava said here in the passage regarding theft, we expound the superfluous or according to the context of the verse. And here in the passage regarding consecrated animals, we expose here the superfluous or according to the context of the verse. So what it means is that whenever you use the word or as a conjunction word, it doesn't per se mean that it's going to be an inclusion or exclusion. There are no set rules. What Rava says is that you've actually got to look at the context of the verse in which it appears, and that would indicate whether it should be expounded to teach it as an inclusion or an exclusion. So what are the rules that you have to learn in order to know? It's because if you look at the passage regarding a theft, where it's written an ox or a seh, which are two species from which you cannot bring forth a hybrid, the superfluous or is expounded to include a hybrid. So let me explain to you what that means. Is if you have a seh, which is the offspring of two animals, right? You can't interbreed a seh with an ox. Why?
Kilayim.
Okay, so that's right, is that there's a verse that you can't breed two animals that are from cross-pollination of species. But an ox and a sheep don't get it together. They can't have offspring. And the reason being is their gestation period is different. Okay, because the gestation period of an ox in terms of pregnancy is 9 months, like a human, whereas the gestation period of sheep or goats is 5 months. So you won't get an offspring from an ox and a sheep. Kev? You're nodding. So you can't get an offspring from an ox or a sheep, can you? Never mind, no. You can try with kilayim, it ain't going to happen. But you can get an offspring from a goat and a sheep because their gestation, even though they're two different species, is similar. If you look at the gestation between a horse and a donkey, what do you get?
A mule.
A mule. And is a mule barren, yes or no?
Yeah, I think so.
Exactly. So that a mule can't have children. Okay? So in that case, you couldn't eat its offspring. Well, it's not kosher anyway, but I'm saying you couldn't. When you have a sheep and a goat, the offspring you can't eat or get benefit from. However, the offspring of that offspring, of the hybrid's offspring, you can eat. But what we are saying is, if ever the pasuk is referring to two things next to each other that can't breed, is that excluding a hybrid or including a hybrid?
Including.
Excluding, because they can't breed. It's automatically exclusive. Because you can't breed an ox and a sheep. So Rava is saying whenever the pasuk normally says an ox or a sheep, obviously automatically by default a hybrid is excluded. Because nothing will come of their relationship. So then you would, when you have the word or, what you're doing is you're including a hybrid. because the default of those two animals would not create a hybrid. Therefore, the default position is the hybrid is excluded, and therefore when you use the word aleph vav for or this one or that one, it's coming to actually then include a hybrid. Because without the or, it's excluded automatically by the fact that those animals can't breed after you're falling asleep. You know what? I don't get it.
I'm exhausted, bro. I got to bed 1 o'clock this morning. Got up at 8 o'clock to get back to work. Going up till 10, 11 again, doing the same thing. So I'm tired. Working 12, 14 hours a day.
Okay. Gavin,
Yeah.
do you understand what I'm saying or not? I can't hear. Let me unmute you. Yeah, okay.
I'm following you, but not. It's quite tricky. I'm understanding that with that an ox and a sheep can't they don't mix together because they have different gestation periods, and I understand that a goat and a sheep, because they have the same gestation periods or similar, they can produce a hybrid. And with a hybrid, you can't get any benefit from a hybrid, but you can from the hybrid's offspring.
Perfect.
And then you were talking about the only part that I just maybe need a slight refresher is the or and the all. So if there's a double or, then the one's kind of redundant. It's come there to teach you something. So I think what it's teaching you is, in the one case, is to exclude it, and the other time to include the hybrid.
Opposite, but you got the concept. You just repeat it. Yeah.
I've got it more or less, but I don't have it 100%. So just repeat that last part about the
Okay,
or.
so if I say an ox or a sheep, right? What that means is that hang on, Gav, one sec. If I say an ox or a sheep, and there's one word for the or, it's not superfluous, because it's either an ox and a sheep or an ox or a sheep. So that first or is not superfluous. So if I say an ox or a sheep, that verse naturally excludes a hybrid from consecration, because an ox and a sheep cannot breed. So there will be no hybrid. So it's naturally excluded from consecration by virtue of the fact that they can't breed. Therefore, if you have another or, it's coming then to include, because it's superfluous. So it's coming to teach you the opposite. Now,
so if there's two ors, that's what I wanted to ask. I was going to ask you a question at the end. So two ors, when it's redundant, does it always include the hybrid? Always.
No. Rav is saying it depends on the verse.
Depends on the context. Depends on the context.
Two ors mean the opposite of what you would read into it. So if you have a sheep and a goat, sheep or a goat, it means that a hybrid is included, because a sheep or a goat will bring about a hybrid. They can mate, they can have children because they have the same gestation period. So it's a crossbreed hybrid. So therefore, it's coming to include a hybrid. When you have the second word or, it would then come to exclude a hybrid. So the one or is not superfluous. Only the second or is superfluous, and that's coming to teach you the opposite. So you look at a verse, and you say an ox or a sheep. Therefore, in context of what that is, it naturally excludes a hybrid, because no hybrid would come from it. If you're looking at different verses and you see a sheep and a goat, it would include a hybrid, because they could produce a hybrid. So therefore, if it's the second or added to either one, it means the opposite of what you could deduce from logic. That's what the superfluous second or is.
So the second or is actually, all right. So okay, I've got it now. So if the two animals can't mate, then there's no need for a second or. There won't be a second or. There'll only be one or, and in that case there won't be a hybrid. And in the case where there's two ors, where they can mate, like a goat and a sheep, if there's one or, it means a hybrid's allowed, and if there's a second or, then it's to exclude the hybrid.
Correct. So second or is opposite from the logical deduction. That's what it's coming to teach you. So it's the context of a verse, Rava says. It's exactly what it's coming to teach you.
All right, that was the only part that I needed clarification on. Thank you.
Okay, do you understand why I had to read it quite a bit? Because I don't know what the point of it was getting at.
I'm surprised you actually ever got out of there. I would have been there for about 6 hours.
But anyway, eventually I Kabb. So Rabbi said here in the passage regarding theft, we expound the superfluous or according to the context of the verse. And here in the passage regarding consecrated animals, we expound the superfluous or according to the context of the verse. Here in the passage regarding theft, where it is written an ox and a seh, or a seh, which are two species from which you cannot bring forth a hybrid, the superfluous or is coming to include a hybrid. Regarding consecrated animals, where it is written a lamb and a goat, which are two species from which you can bring forth a hybrid, the superfluous or is coming to exclude a hybrid. Okay, now for me to have deduced that, I needed to read it more than once, believe me. Okay, so the Gemara states, with respect to, all right, I'll tell you what, guys, I think let's stop at this point. We've got 5 minutes to get ready for Rav Simcha's shir. It was I did mess up a bit tonight. I should have done more for my gram.
No, you did plenty, Damon. So just so, Gavin, if there are two, so there should only be one, or if there's, just say that last point again.
All right,
the one or is superfluous. The one or is superfluous.
No. So Kevin, all right.
One is relevant.
Rav is saying you've got to look at the verse. So when it's looking at the verse of theft, when you see the term ox and a seh, you know that a seh is either coming from a goat or a sheep. So a seh cannot breed with an ox. A goat or a sheep, therefore, there will never be a hybrid because they can't breed.
The gestation period.
So because the gestation period is different. So therefore, it's naturally excluded. So the second word or is coming to include a hybrid, which means if a thief steals or a hybrid and sells it or slaughters it, he's eligible to the 4 or 5-fold payment. Why? Because the second or includes a hybrid in terms of liability, because you couldn't deduce it unless there was a second or. So the first or is not superfluous. It's coming to give you a logical deduction to say, can those animals breed? If they can't, then there's no hybrid included. It's excluded. And then if they can breed, then a hybrid's included. So the second or is coming to teach you the opposite of whatever you've logically deduced, because that's superfluous, the second or. So in the case of theft, you say an ox or a sheep, which can't have a hybrid, so therefore it's excluded from liability for theft, for slaughtering or selling it. So therefore there's another or that says, no, it's actually in the case of theft included for liability. Because if a person has a hybrid, the thief is responsible for stealing it, selling it, or slaughtering it. That's fine. Then you look at the verse of consecrated animals, and it talks about a seah and a goat or a sheep, right? You know those animals can breed. So it means then to include a hybrid in consecration. And then there's another order that says, no, you cannot consecrate a hybrid. It's not even kosher to eat. So the second order is teaching you the opposite of the logical deduction. The logical deduction is that a hybrid can come from a goat and a sheep. So therefore you would think it's included in the consecration. And the second order is teaching you you're not allowed to consecrate it. That's what it's coming to teach you, the opposite. All right, guys, we're going to end off at this note. Rav Simcha is going to teach us in 2 minutes off. I hope you have a good night. I've already set you on your journey to sleep. And God bless everybody.
Yeah. Cheers.
Gavin was going to say something.